A short while ago, I made a video extolling the virtues of steel manning your opponents in arguments and conversations, and taking them at their word and taking the strongest form of their argument as something to work against, something to discuss. So I'm going to put that into practice here, and I'm setting myself quite the challenge because I'm going to talk about Boris Johnson and his recent comments about the burqa. Times being what they are, it is unfortunately necessary to preface this discussion by demonstrating that I don't like Boris Johnson. I don't like Boris Johnson. To say that I am not a fan of Boris Johnson would put you in serious contention for winning the World Prize for Understatement. This problem he has, this buffoon of a man, is only exacerbated by the fact that he seems to consider himself to be some sort of reincarnation of a combination of Cecil Rhodes and Rudyard Kipling. And while he is erudite and educated, that doesn't by any means mean that he's clever and put in mind of Krupp and Vandermeer from Neverwhere, talking about how just because they're funny, just because they amuse the Marquis de Carabas, does not mean that they are not dangerous. This is the kind of person he is. The man is, in my consideration, an over-educated idiot. And he seems to think he's all these wonderful things rather than being a botched first attempt by a balloon artist at constructing an orangutan out of water balloons. I don't like him. I am not conservative. I will likely never be conservative. There might be some circumstance in which I could flip, but I cannot envision it. It is an outside context problem for me. Are we clear? I don't like Boris Johnson. Good. Now, Boris, who has been Mayor of London, who has been Foreign Secretary, he's become these things in spite of seemingly being unable to take 2 steps down the street without committing some sort of political gaffe. He has an undeniable talent for insulting and upsetting people. It really is quite remarkable that a politician could be so successful with that handicap. He's also one of the masterminds that drove Brexit, despite not apparently really wanting it, all to fuel his own political ambitions, and he may well likely be amongst the challengers to go after May when the inevitable inevitably happens. But what's got him into hot water is a column he wrote for The Telegraph. This is a right-leaning newspaper here in the UK. And in particular, it's comments about the burqa, in which he made comparisons to bank robbers and to letterboxes in this article. It's like 2 lines out of a full article. And for this, he is being publicly crucified by the left-wing press, political opportunists, and so on. Now, I don't doubt that Boris is at heart the kind of paternalistic racist that was so popular in times of empire, and I think he genuinely believes Britain is still this great untapped imperial power just biding its time sort of thing. Nothing could be further from the truth, but I don't doubt that he believes it, and I don't doubt that he is racist. But calling him racist because of these comments taken in isolation, steelmanned, taken as the strongest position they could possibly be, with all that in mind, the way he is being treated at the moment strikes me as being distinctly unfair and disingenuous. Boris actually spends most of the article bloviating about Denmark and how wonderful it is that it's kept itself separate from the EU and blah 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 blah. Other things that I find fantastically more offensive than pointing out that the little slit in a burqa looks like a letterbox. You know, things that actually really directly affect many people's lives, the population as a whole, for the worse. But let's just push that aside for now and concentrate on these comments on the burqa, which is what people have picked out. Now, the comparison to a letterbox is an obvious visual comparison. That and similar comparisons are things that comedians on all sides of the political spectrum have noted before with wry amusement, and the comparison with bank robbers is apt because we do have laws and conventions and restrictions on when you can and can't cover your face, and this has particularly been thrust to the fore with Black Bloc and Antifa and so on covering their faces during protests that they have engaged in. You know, worrying about not being able to see someone is a legitimate fear in a lot of cases, and we do have laws that restrict it. For example, if you rock up in your motorbike to a garage and you go in to buy fuel, you're supposed to take your helmet off so that you can be seen by the CCTV, so you can be witnessed in case you're trying to rob the place. And if you go in without taking your helmet off, people are going to be on guard. Same thing with banks and other instances. You can't go around with your face covered. Making an exception for religion would be an example of a privilege and forcing you to show your face for certain jobs, or when getting fuel, or when going into a bank. These aren't examples of racism or prejudice, it's examples of one rule being applied to everyone. Now, the thrust of the comments, when he's not bloviating about Europe, are discussing, albeit at a very surface and facile level, all the implications of either banning the burqa or not banning the burqa, and these are conversations that should be had, certainly in Western First World nations. For all that his analysis is very surface level, it's not especially deep, he does kind of sketch out the parameters of the discussion, and lists the countries and where veils and so on have been banned to one degree or another, the list being one that Denmark has recently joined, which hence the article, really. And there is a lot to consider here. I mean, in a free country you should be able to wear or not wear whatever you want, but the burqa is genuinely a tool of patriarchal, small p, oppression in a lot of countries. And even in countries where it's not the societal norm, where it can't be enforced by the state, as it is in some places, even there is an immense amount of social pressure within these Islamic communities to cover up. And that can be enforced with violence, familial sanction, economic sanction, and so forth. So, to say you should be able to wear what you want is one thing, but the reality of the situation is that even people who don't want to wear the burqa may be in situations where they have to, or they will suffer the wrath of their family, beatings, even death. That's not a good situation. And if we ban the burqa, then those people are then free to cast it aside, and they can put blame onto the government. So that can be a good thing. But if we do ban it, there are people who genuinely, freely, uncoerced want to wear it. So what do we do there? There is no good answer to this, and the law is a blunt instrument that can't really be used in cases of fine nuance and degree, such as the issues around this. But we should be able to have the conversation, and it should be an ongoing conversation, and maybe we can find a path, a route to maximising freedom for everybody, those who do want to wear it and those who don't want to wear it. But we can't have the conversation because people read any criticism of Islam or the burqa or the veil or anything else around Islam as being racist somehow, even though it's an ideology and a religion and not a race. And as an ideology and as a religion, it has ideas, which I think any Western liberal-minded person would say are bad. And yet the modern left seems to defend Islam, even though it is genuinely, in a huge amount of cases, misogynistic and repressive and oppressive. And yeah, it seems to get a pass, and any criticism is taken as racism, to the point where people like Sam Harris and plenty of other liberally minded left-wing people who criticise Islam the same as they would any other religion end up getting lumped in with the Richard Spencers of the world. Yeah, and you wouldn't say that criticising genuine white supremacist ideology was racist towards white people, hopefully. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And we can't even start to have the conversation without this much fuss. Now, some of it's political opportunism and so on. Some people probably genuinely do think he is being racist and is dog whistling and whatever else, and I expect he is quite racist in his beliefs deep down. But if we take him at his word here, what he's actually said, all he's doing is sketching out the issues around this, where the problems are, and in the end he comes down against a burqa ban, which doesn't seem to me to be the actions, honest or not, of someone who really genuinely has a deep-seated hatred of Muslims, and yet this is how it's being portrayed, and people are trying to get him investigated. And then, as so often happens, we end up not talking about the issue that we're all, hopefully, actually interested in, but discussing whether merely raising the issue is racist or Islamophobic or whatever else, when we should be discussing the veil, what we think about it, whether we think a ban is justified, whether the greater good is served by a ban or not a ban, whether people should get special dispensation because of their religion to wear it, whether we prioritise concern for women being treated poorly by a misogynistic tradition, or whether we revere this religion and allow it to essentially enforce blasphemy laws on a country that doesn't really have them anymore. It's all fucked. Zang.
Today, see, I don't like I have, okay, like a lot of you, I hate a lot, you know? But I hate with style and creativity.